With the fifth and final season of A&E's Bates Motel about to start up, it seemed like a great opportunity to talk about Psycho and its sequels. From a timeline perspective, how does it hold up, and how does continuity work out? Let's take a look and find out. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho came out in 1960 and redefined suspense films. The opening of the film tells us to we're in Phoenix on December 11th, and it's Friday. Although it doesn't give the year, if we go back on the calendar, it was December 11th on a Friday in 1959, so that's when we're going to place it. We meet Marion, who steals the whopping sum of $40,000 and tries to run away to meet her secret lover in California. An intense rain lands her at Bates Motel, where she rents a room from the innkeeper, Norman Bates. And after overhearing an altercation between Norman and his housebound mother, Marion goes to take a shower and makes film history. Seriously, I know a lot of younger viewers don't really appreciate this, but this scene is why I'm glad I have one of those see-through glass shower doors. And this scene is also important because Janet Leigh was a huge star at the time, so people were going to see this movie assumed that she was our lead character. It was a huge shock to see her killed off. Anyway, Marion's sister Lila and lover Sam want to find her, and so does this private detective. He figures out she went to the motel and mother kills him. When Sam and Lila go to find him, they discover Norman's secret. His mother is dead in the cellar, and he has been dressing in her clothing to kill people. After he's stopped, the psychiatrist reveals that Norman has a split personality with his mother, who Norman killed along with his mother's lover by poisoning them 10 years earlier. Now, the mother persona has completely taken over and Norman is put away. I don't really have any jokes for this segment because the movie's that great, it just doesn't feel right to joke about it. A sequel wasn't released until after Hitchcock's death in 1983 finally saw the release of Psycho 2. Pinning down an exact date is a little tricky since no precise times are given, but all the promotional releases stated that after 22 years, Norman Bates was finally coming home. A sheriff at one point states something about 20 years ago, which he was approximating, and that 22 years seems pretty official. Knowing that the first film begins in December of 1959 and the events most likely extended out into 1960, and that was most likely the year that Norman was locked away, that makes this set in 1982. Lila is there as Norman is released to protest, wanting to see him locked away forever. However, he's released and returns to the motel under the care of Robert Loggia. He starts work at a local diner run by a nice little old lady, Miss Spool. He meets a pretty young co-worker named Mary and invites her to stay at his place, and then meets the new hotel manager, Detective Sipowicz, who I guess is undercover here. Norman sees some mysterious notes and visions of Mother, and pretty soon people are getting killed, and shortly afterwards it's revealed that Mary is actually Lila's daughter, and they're posing as Mother to drive Norman crazy. Hey, guess what? Kinda worked. Mother kills Lila, and Norman goes into full breakdown mode, causing Mary to try and snap him out of it. She accidentally kills Mr. Loggia, and then gets shot by the police while trying to kill Norman. Norman is cleared of any crimes, and we get one last reveal. Ms. Spool is actually Norman's real mother. The woman Norman thought was his mother was actually his aunt, who raised him while Spool was locked away. It was her that did all the killing, and Norman doesn't actually kill anyone at... Oh. Alright. Well, he then takes her body to Mother's room and the cycle begins anew. The second movie did well enough that 3 years later we get Psycho 3. It starts off with a young nun who accidentally kills another and then leaves the convent, meeting a creepy pervert along the way. Norman is still in charge of the hotel, although it looks totally decrepit at this point, which is weird since we soon discover that Ms. Poole has been missing for 1 month. That firmly sets this film as 1 month after the previous, so we're still set in 1982. A few people mention Norman being locked away for 20 years, and he corrects them to state that it was actually 22 years, so we get that time frame locked down in the actual films for the first time and not simply promotional material. Norman sees the young nun, Maureen, and thinks that she's Marion Crane. Maureen stays at the hotel, and soon enough, things are weird with Norman again. Mother shows up, but it turns out that Maureen was killing herself, so Norman actually ends up saving her. They start a sorta courting, which makes Mother pretty upset, and pretty soon some other people start getting killed off. Everything culminates with Norman killing the pervert, accidentally killing Maureen, and then facing off against a reporter doing a story on him. She reveals that Spool was not actually his mother, and was simply his aunt who was crazy. Mother tries to convince Norman otherwise, and he finally turns on her, killing Mother. Or, I don't know, just stabbing her corpse. Norman gets taken away, claiming to finally be free of Mother, but he's still stroking her mummified arm as they drive away. 1 year later, in 1987, they tried to launch a Psycho TV series, creating a pilot called Bates Motel. It didn't get picked up, but they aired the pilot as a TV movie, and it's a direct sequel to the first film with a recast Norman Bates being locked away. He befriends Alex, and 20-some years later, Norman dies. At his will reading, he leaves this lady a turkey, and then he leaves the hotel to Alex. Alex moves in, Lori Petty shows up in a chicken suit, Jason Bateman shows up, and there's some crap about alternate dimension ghosts, and a killer who turns out to be a banker, which is very Scooby-Doo. None of it matters since it's not canon and it's all pretty silly. A few years later, in 1990, we get Psycho for the Beginning. We start off with a radio show about matricide and Norma calls in. It turns out that he's reformed now and married to a psychiatrist named Connie, and living a normal life. He tells the host about his backstory, bouncing around a little bit. He tells of his first murder as mother, his father's funeral, and his distorted relationship with his mom, who we see alive for the first time in the series. John Landis shows up as the show producer and doesn't drop a single helicopter on anyone, so that's nice. Norman's story creates quite a few continuity gaps. There's no mention whatsoever of Ms. Spool, and is told that Norman's father died of bee stings, not killed by Ms. Spool. Although it seems to ignore the events of the second and third movies, Norman confesses that his last murders were 4 years ago. Although it has been 4 years since the last film, Part 3 was still set in 1982, so either this film is set in 1986, or Norman is purposefully misrepresenting dates. I'd like to go with the latter option, since the former would mean that after killing multiple people in Part 3, he was able to be incarcerated, reformed, and meet and marry Connie within 4 years. It all wraps up with Norman revealing that Connie is pregnant and he intends to kill her to prevent his evil from passing on. He gets her back to the old house and tries to stab her, but love wins out, and Norman instead burns the house down, proclaiming that he's finally free. Anthony Perkins would die 2 years later, so this ends this timeline of the series and Norman gets his happy ending. 8 years later, an inevitable remake happens, and it happened in the strangest way possible. Oscar winner Gus Van Sant decided to remake the film with Anne Heche, Vince Vaughn, Julianne Moore, and William H. Macy and make it a shot-for-shot reproduction of the original. There were only minor changes. The opening actually sets the date as 1998, whereas the original gave no date. The dollar amounts are also changed. $40,000 becomes $400,000, and so on. I don't know, I guess it's kind of interesting. I guess, but almost 20 years later, I'm still not sure if I get the point of it. Finally, in 2013, we got a new Norman in the form of A&E's Bates Motel. It reboots everything and is set in modern times, retelling the story of Norman's formative years with his mother. The 4th season ended with Norman's death and Norman taking on the mother persona, and the upcoming 5th season will delve into the events of the original film with Rihanna playing Marion Crane. So there you have it, 4 movies, a remake, a TV pilot, and a TV show, all about a boy and his mother. Although the continuity is fairly tight, there's definitely a few road bumps along the way. One thing's for sure, anyone viewing this series will never look at a shower the same way again. That's about it for this week. Feel free to share the video. Please link it on whatever social media you feel free. Leave me some comments. Let me know what series you'd like to see. We're going to be branching out a little bit. The next series will actually be a sci-fi timeline, so it should be a little bit interesting as well for you. Also, please feel free to check out my Patreon page as well if you would like to donate to the cause to see some more movies made and get more movies made on a regular basis. But thanks a lot. We'll see you again, and thanks for watching.